All righty. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me on this rather hot Friday in Heidelberg, Germany. Today is an interesting topic, I think. It's a continuation of the series of webcasts that I'll be doing. I'll be taking a break during August, but we'll be picking up soon after that again. And we are going to talk about a tool that I've used with quite a bit of success to help prioritize things. We will talk about it in the context of requirements and features, of course. This is a software product management webcast series. So I will show you the tool. More importantly, I'll talk about the practice around the tool. I will try to leave plenty of time for questions. You should see a little blue thing you can click. I would love it if somebody would just ask some question now or just say hello so that I know that you guys are seeing me out there. But without further ado, let me share and we will jump into the deck and really get started. So, a little bit about me. I worked at IBM, Microsoft, and SAP as a product manager. I've been doing it for, I guess, around 16 years. I started in 2000. Done a lot of stuff with Agile and Lean. Today, I have a consulting firm. I also do training, live training around software product management. I have an online course. I'll talk a tiny bit more about that at the end of the webcast. So what is the background to this topic? I've been a product manager a long time in big shops. A lot of people have opinions. And I was always finding myself in these conversations that I didn't think were particularly productive around what should we include in the release, what shouldn't we. Sometimes we had discussions about whether we should build or buy. There were a lot of discussions. And I'm a kind of impatient person. So I really wanted to find a simple tool and a practice that would help ground the conversation, drive people toward consensus. I'm going to show you a super simple tool. I'm sure you've seen something like it before. But once again, I think what's more important than the tool is the practice around the tool. So first, what is collaborative feature prioritization? Pretty simple. It's just prioritizing things. They may be requirements, they may be features. Those are different things. But same idea, you've got multiple stakeholders with different opinions. Very often in my career, development had a very strong opinion about what we should be developing, as they should. It was good. Throw in somebody from marketing, throw in somebody from Q, maybe throw in another couple of product managers, and you can end up in these seemingly never-ending, circling conversations about what you should do. So these are the key challenges to that process. Communication gets very inefficient. If you disagree about something, as I said, you circle, you feel like, you're in this kind of time warp where the same things keep coming up. Emotion, after a while, starts playing a part. It escalates during the meeting. Sometimes that has fallout after the meeting, which can cause bitterness. So if the person who has the most patience or screams the loudest in the meeting kind of wins the conversation, in other words, gets their way, it can cause bitterness after the fact, and that can be very hard to overcome later. And what that results in is diminishing commitment. People feel like their voice wasn't heard, that maybe an unfair decision was made, and really unfortunate, and causes lack of productivity later. And then people don't think about this, but we make a bunch of decisions. We later learn things. It would be nice to be able to go back, look at the decision we made in some structured way and get some insight. So we may make a decision that doesn't work out and everybody's like, who made that decision? Well, as product manager, you have the final say. A lot of that will splash back on you, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to go back and remind ourselves exactly why we made the decision and put ourselves in a position to learn? So when I started thinking about the solution to this problem, you can think of what I talked about on the previous slide as almost like a problem statement. What I wanted was some kind of tooling, something to record information. It had to be super simple. I didn't want a customized tool. It needed to be reasonably objective, this process for prioritizing. I wanted a practice around it so that it would be repeatable, so that we could learn, so that we could mature. And as I just mentioned, really important, I wanted to be able to go back and remind myself specifically why I chose option A rather than B, and ideally learn something. So I'm going to give you an example of the tool that I use. I'll talk about the practice. It's based on a pretty simple use case. I didn't want to do this abstractly. This is more of a solution. It's a little more complicated than just a software product. Same principles apply. So we have this Eagle Eye solution, and it's essentially a surveillance solution. So there are a bunch of cameras monitoring some area. There are some operators back in a control center, and the cameras have software running on them that can detect threats. So they can detect when a crowd forms. They can detect a traffic accident. And when that happens, they automatically generate an event that goes to an operator who then has to deal with it. He might have to call the police. He might have to call the fire department. He may need to change the position of the camera to gather evidence, those kinds of things. So pretty, I think, straightforward surveillance scenario. Here's the typical use case. An operator in a control center logs on. All of a sudden, after a concert, a crowd starts forming. There are video analytics, as I said, this software that can tell their people they're gathering together in a place or at a time that they shouldn't. An event gets generated and then is presented to the operator through software. He's staring at a screen, maybe a little ding goes off. He looks, it'll automatically show him what's on the camera. It may show him an operations guide so he knows how to respond. And then the operator follows the steps, as I said, maybe calls the authorities, does whatever he needs to do, and can use this software and the cameras to get more information, to get more context. Super simple architecture. On the right, we have a bunch of cameras. Some of them may be wireless. Somehow they're connected to a network. And then on the left side, we've got this control center. So we've got operators sitting in front of workstations, and we've got a really rich server that takes this event, adds context to it, shows it in the UI, may show a graphical information system, something like Google Maps, an equivalent that shows where things are happening, maybe where ambulances are, where police are, that kind of thing. So that's the solution that we'll be talking about. Now I'm going to jump directly into the tool. So I want to show you the tool. I'm sure you've seen something similar. I'll make a few observations, and then we'll start talking about the practice around this, how you use the tool. So I will switch to Excel, and bada bing, bada boom. I said I wanted a simple tool, and sure enough, we've got a workbook in Excel. This is an example worksheet, and the structure is pretty easy. On the far left, I've got a list of items. Here, these are features that I'm trying to decide, prioritize. I only have so much development capacity. I need to figure out what I want to include in the release. Across the top, I have these criteria. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to score all these features based on this consistent set of criteria. So you can hover the mouse over the column header, and you see a comment that describes what that criterion means. So the first one is broad customer value. Does this feature, does it add value to a big percentage of our customers? Is it on vision? Absolutely critical. You can't just do what the market wants. You should know more than the market. You should have a vision, and ceteris paribus, right? You want to do things that are on vision before you do things that aren't quite so much on vision. There's a criterion, does it differentiate our product in the market? What will be the impact on sales? We've talked about the impact on the customers we have. What about the customers we want? Pardon? Is it feasible? Really important criteria. Can we build this? And then, of course, development effort. You can define your own criteria. In my experience, it's best to limit those to maybe 7 to 9. We give each one a score. 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 is usually what I use. I've come to prefer the 1 to 4 scale because there's no middle ground. It's either kind of below the mean or above the middle score. We score these things. We can do an average. Here, I've summed them up. I can sort them, and I get a little insight. So this isn't a stack ranking tool. I can't necessarily tell you that This feature, because it got a score of 21, is clearly more important than this one that got a score of 19. But what you will find is if you have the right criteria, you will see these buckets. It's essentially a triage process. This tool will help you identify things that are clearly priorities that you should probably pursue and look into. This may be early in the release cycle. You haven't done a lot of analysis. So you want to really limit the number of things that you invest time in. Towards the bottom, you'll usually see a group of things that scored low and are probably things that you shouldn't invest in. Those are great candidates for things that you will just say, hey, you know what, I'm not going to invest more time. And then you've got the things in the middle, and those require a little more thought. You may need to do a little more analysis. You may have to use judgment. And at the end of the day, it's always going to be about your judgment. So theoretically, something could score pretty low and you may decide to include it, but it will be a conscious decision. You will, have to express that you're deviating from the model. This is a collaborative tool, meaning a bunch of people can use it together and probably should. And I will take you through scoring one of these options. And you can use a lot of simple tricks with just formatting, like basic video search was a feature that we discussed. We scored it, but there was a lot of disagreement. So we're going to give somebody an opportunity to go do some research and see if they can influence these scores, see if these scores should change. We have a feature here that is license plate reader events. I made it bold, which means it's new. So this can be a living document, especially toward the beginning of the release. You go in, you add things, you score them, you get a new idea from a customer, it's great. You pump it into the matrix, you score it, and you see where it stands relative to the other investments that you're thinking about making. So in this case, we have license plate readers deployed on streets, usually on overpasses. So as cars go by, it reads their license plate, and we can set up rules that if license plate X passes by, send me an event. That person is a criminal or whatever it may be. That person hasn't paid their tickets. It could be anything. So what we're deciding here is relative to the other things that we're thinking about including in our next release, should we support events for license plate readers? There's going to be some work around that. So I would go through, usually in a group, it may be a conference call. Ideally, we're together in a room, and we'll look at broad customer value, and we'll have a discussion. And what we'll decide here is that most of our customers really do video surveillance. There aren't that many of our customers that do license plate recognition. It's not a capability they need, but some of them do. It could be a growing market, so we're going to give that a 2. The highest score, of course, would be a 4. Is it on vision? And here we might decide, you know what, we really want to get into traffic scenarios. That's a big market. It's not, at the core of what we want to do, but it's part of what we want to do. I'm going to give that a 3. Does it differentiate us in the market? Turns out that a lot of vendors already have this. We're going to give that a 1. What's the impact on sales? Well, maybe sales is at the table. Hopefully I've consulted them and they may say, you know what, I've got a couple of projects we could sell next year, a couple of potential customers. It could actually have a pretty significant impact on sales. We'll give it a 3. How feasible is it? There we're very confident. This is just another event type. We know how to work with license plate readers. We'll give it a 4. And then development effort. That's why I really need to do this collaboratively. I need development at the table to give me some idea. So here they're not making a commitment. That's the beauty. They're just giving me an idea relative to these other things. Is this a quick win? Is this a big investment? And what development tells me is that this is pretty simple to do. It's not trivial. It'll take some work. So we give it a 3. And notice there that if development thinks that it's expensive, it gets a lower score than if they think it's pretty straightforward. And what we end up with here, this is just chance. I was kind of making that up as we go along. This scored a 16. And I can see that there are other options in the matrix that scored 18, 19, 21. So this new requirement came in. I put it in the matrix, I scored it, and now I have some idea about where it falls relative to our other investments that can help me make a decision. Once again, it doesn't make the decision for you. This is input. And what it allows people to do who are at the table is sales may come back. Maybe I thought it was a 3. I review this with them and they say, you know what? Nobody's asking for that. I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on sales. Maybe we'll get a customer here or there. So let's change that to 2. It's gone down in priority. Some people may argue that, wait, this is wrong. I think that we're going to have really broad customer value. I was in an event last week. I talked to a bunch of customers. They really want this thing. So very easily, you can change the score. You can see that for some of them, I've added these simple Excel comments to remind me why we gave that score. And what it tends to do is structure the conversation. So if we agree upon these criteria ahead of time, we can define guidelines for what the scores mean. We actually have a structured conversation. So somebody may come into the room, they may have walked into the process thinking that unattended object video analytics was the next greatest thing since, greatest thing since sliced bread. We score it, it gets a low score. I've seen this happen. People will tend to back off and say, yeah, I thought it was great, but now I see that, for example, it's not going to differentiate us. It got a low score on impact of sales. That's the sales folks telling us that. So you know what? My little pet feature maybe isn't as great as I thought it was. So really great way to drive people to consensus. I can tell you from experience that once the team gets used to doing this, the process goes really quickly. So a team that was used to this kind of thing, maybe at the beginning of a release cycle, could probably score all these features. Once the features were entered in, and you can see the column header says requirement, you can do it with requirements, you can do it with features. You can use this to prioritize almost anything. But super important, or great way to drive people towards consensus. It's about that simple. Now you see this thing prepared. First, you have to come up with the items that you want to put in here. If there are things I know I need to do, maybe there's some technical debt that I have to deal with, I may not put it in the matrix because no matter what score it gets, I know I need to do it. So this is really more valuable for discretionary things. It doesn't stack rank things, but it gives you some ideas and hopefully keeps some of the emotion out of the discussion. And to most participants, in my experience, it really seems more objective. You can do this super quick. So that's the point I was going to make earlier. A team could probably score all these things in 20 minutes once they're experienced. You will find it goes pretty fast. So that is the tool. I will make that available to you after the webcast. You can build one yourself pretty quickly. There's another variant that I have in my example that would support weighting. So maybe you don't think each criterion has the same importance. So you can change the weights. You may say that what's really important to us is to be innovative. So I could make that one of the criteria. I would give that a higher weight than some of the other ones. My personal experience is that this isn't critical. You don't need to do weighting, but some people will insist on it. And it's nice to know that that's very easy to do in Excel. This is a simple Excel table. I can sort it, I can filter it, I can do all kinds of things. Another point is I would be careful about having 60 or 70 things in here. I think that's too many. 3 or 4 is too few. So maybe up to the low 10s is manageable. You can drive people toward consensus. I've seen a lot of success not using individual features. You can also do kind of end-to-end scenarios. Some people may call those epics. But hopefully you get the idea. You can use this to prioritize almost anything. So let's go back to our presentation. That was the tool. We will talk a little bit now about how you use this thing, because that's really the high art. Anybody can crank out this tool. You will find other people have talked about it. This thing has been developed independently millions of times. So what makes the difference, I think, between success and this just being another tool that doesn't add value is the way you use it. So I would say it's 20% tooling. You could write these things on a whiteboard almost. It's the practice around it that really dictates, I think, whether or not you'll be successful with it. So I think about using the tool in these high-level steps. You're going to prepare, and we will decompose each one of these. You will actually do the prioritization exercise. You spend some time interpreting the results, and then you revisit the decisions you've made or the scores that you've given as necessary. So let's talk about how you would prepare. First, you need to agree on the criteria. I would try to keep it to 7 to 9. 2 or 3, you may not get the differentiation between the items that you want. More than that, it just gets a little unwieldy. Remember, this isn't supposed to crank out a stack ranked list, but give you some input into your decision making. So 7 to 9 is a good number there. If you're going to do weights, agree upon those, and it's important to get buy-in. It's important that everybody says, yes, these are the key criteria. And as you use it, that may evolve. You may realize that you're missing something. You can add it. That's fine. Define the scoring scale. It's usually either 1 to 4, 1 to 5. I wouldn't go above 7. I've seen success with both 4 and 5. I told you my preference is 4. Figure out what you're going to put in there. Make sure they're parallel, that they're consistent. Don't have a requirement, then a feature, then an epic. Make sure they're all the same thing. It can be interesting to assign an advocate to each item. I was on a team that was assessing new business opportunities, and each of us would take ownership. We would gather a bunch of information as a group on a conference call, by the way. We would score them, and then each person could advocate. If there was a question about its impact on sales, or if it's on vision or feasibility, that person could speak to it. So you might want to prepare information. We had a thing called a topic profile. Very simple little PowerPoint deck, maybe 7 or 8 slides that captured all the basics so that, you know, other people who were participating in the scoring could read and learn about it. And then you need to think about how you will reconsider topics or items. So somebody may come in, they may say, wow, this isn't fair. That score is too low. What we would do is say, okay, you have one chance to come back to the team and convince us again that these scores are different. That's one of the beauties of the tool. If somebody doesn't agree with it, there's a remedy. You can say, okay, what did we get wrong? Did we not have the right criteria? Or did we not score something correctly? And if we didn't score it correctly, you're welcome to come back to us with more data, prove us wrong. We can change the score, and that may change the decision that we make. An important question is, who should be at the table when you're prioritizing these things? Obviously, you as a product manager should be driving it. You may be in an organization doing Agile. I would have people like product owners there, representatives from development and architecture, maybe Q. And we didn't do this a lot, but sometimes it can be very valuable to get the input of sales and marketing people. That's a lot of roles that I've listed here. I would try to keep the group down to 5 to 7 people. Beyond that, the conversations go all over the place. So you can always do an initial scoring and then take it back to specific audiences to refine it. But I would say 5 to 7 people. I think this is the usual list of suspects. We often overlook the kind of outward facing folks like sales and marketing. It can be very valuable to include them. I would consider using this tool with customers. Maybe you have a customer council. Maybe you're at an event and you can pull some of them together, but do it as a parallel exercise. Drive them to consensus. Have the internal view, then you have the external view. You may invite some partners, and that can be a very interesting comparison. You can learn a lot when you find things that they've prioritized much higher or much lower. So consider doing it, but I would do it in a parallel exercise. Once we've prepared, we actually do the prioritization. We sit down with the tool. It's great to send it out ahead of time, maybe put it on a SharePoint or on a share somewhere where people can look at it, where they can look at the background information on the items that you've collected. As with anything else, we're human beings. It's nice to be physically located. That can really facilitate communication. Assign a facilitator. As product manager, I would say that would be you. That's the person who takes you through the list, who talks about the scoring, who enters the score in the tool. You can capture the context, as you saw, with comments. I think that's important. I think a lot of the cells in one of these things should have comments, so you can remind yourself what was the rationale behind that score. And as you go, you can start capturing guidelines. So you may say, one of my criteria is revenue impact. If it's up to $1 million, it's a 1. If it's 2 to 3, it gets a score of a 2. Up to 10, it's a score of a 3, and over 10 million, if we think it'll have more than $10 million, euros, whatever, of impact on revenue, that gets a 4. And you can put those right in the spreadsheet. I would put them on another worksheet. And over time, that makes the process fair, repeatable, a little more objective. The next step is to interpret the scores. So I would sort them, obviously, by score. I would look at the buckets. I would check that there's a reasonable distribution. If my highest score is a 20 and my lowest score is an 18, everything basically has the same priority. What that typically means is that you haven't picked the right criteria. You may also want to revisit some of the scores, but at that point, you haven't selected criteria that are differentiating the items, and that's what we want. We looked at the score for each row. You can also look at the columns. So maybe you have a criterion that has to do with innovation. You can look at the sum of that column and see, have we picked a bunch of features that will overall allow us to innovate? Or do we have a bunch of features that overall will really have a big impact on sales? So the more you work with the tool, the more of these relationships you'll see. You can do that analysis. And then you can schedule follow-ups as necessary. If you interpret them and you see that there are two things that got the same score, you can send people off once again to do more analysis, to look into it, and maybe find a way to differentiate those things. It makes the decision a little easier and certainly more transparent. This is where people probably, we tend to use these things, we figure out what we want to do, and then we forget about it. But what would really be valuable is to go back after the release, or after, the product or the features have been in the market a certain period of time, revisit the matrix, look at why you made the decisions, see if you made good decisions. And if you didn't, or if you did, try to figure out why. Where were you wrong? Where were you really right? This is about continuous improvement, going back and reminding ourselves why we made the decisions we made. And that could result in a lot of things. We might tweak the criteria. We may decide that we should add, as I said before, innovation. That wasn't in the example I gave you. The board has told us that we need to be thought leaders. They want to see innovation. We can add that as a column. As you're doing this, you should be really careful not to select self-serving criteria that will support your kind of features, the ones you think are important. It's important that these things be well-rounded, that you have all kinds of criteria that reflect the functional and business perspective, as well as the technical perspective. You need to be careful about who's sitting at the table. I've been in situations where execs came into the process in organizations that were maybe very hierarchical, and they had too much influence. You really want this to be a team exercise where everybody is heard. It should be fairly democratic. So I would say I would try to make these decisions on the team and then present the results to executive leadership. I'm not sure that they always need to be at the table while you're scoring. And if they ask, why are you doing this instead of this? You have a very nice story. You can tell them with a lot of detail why this option was much better than this option. And that can be valuable too. We've all seen execs or people who have kind of their pet feature, something that they want to do. When they see it scored against the other things, as I've said, my experience is people tend to back off. 90% of the time, they will accept the results. And do not treat this as stack ranking. Don't let people say, hey, the feature I wanted scored an 18 and yours only scored a 17. It doesn't work like that. The tool can do nice triage, can provide nice input. I would never use it as a stack ranking tool. And once again, Excel doesn't make decisions. That's what you as a product manager gets paid to do. There's some advanced things you can do as the process increases. You can think about weighting, as we looked at before, weight each criterion. You could play prioritization poker. So you could have, different people kind of at the same time put out their scores. You could have a discussion before you actually update one of the columns, for example. I told you about topic profiles, these very simple PowerPoints that get all the information about the items in the list in the same format and allows people to study, to be prepared to make the best decision possible. We talked about doing parallel exercises where customers or other stakeholders do the scoring. And you could also do scoring by different market segments. This is something a lot of us overlook. Our customers are not homogenous typically. So it could be very interesting to see what, down market customers want, maybe smaller customers as opposed to enterprise customers, or what the people in Vietnam want versus what people want in Europe, those kinds of things. So there's really no end to what you can do with this tool. My guidance would be keep it simple. That's its beauty. It's not making decisions. It's putting a little structure into the conversation, helping me be a little more objective and transparent. There are a lot of other uses for this same approach, as I'm sure you can imagine. I told you we did it for incubation ideas, new business ideas. You could do it with your family on vacation ideas. Those kinds of conversations can get out of hand. So that can be super valuable. And it just takes a few minutes to put one of these together, especially once you have the template. And most recently, I had a client who was doing hiring. They asked for my input. They sent me 3 or 4 resumes. I thought about what I thought was important. I created the matrix, I scored it, and then went through the hiring manager. And we had a conversation and we adjusted the scores. And he was really impressed with the process. So people that at first seemed like they were a really good fit, we were better able to see their weaknesses. In this case, what was interesting is the scores that we came up with, they were my criteria, but they kind of matched his intuition. He had given them simpler scores, just, kind of based on intuition. And that's valuable as well. The matrix based on agreed upon criteria kind of corroborated or backed up what he wanted to do. That's all for today in terms of the tool, in terms of the practice. I think the tool is simple. I think the practice should be simple. So let's not belabor it. I told you before, I give public trainings. You can go to prickrell.com and find out about those. If your organization needs help with software product management maturity, drop me a line. I've launched an online software product management course. A lot of people are just too busy or don't live in a place where they can get training. You can go to my site. You can register for the course. It's over 8 hours of lectures. There are exercises. There's all kinds of things, and you can do it at your own pace. I've put it together so that each lesson is maybe 15 minutes. So it's pretty easy to watch. You can maybe watch a lecture or 2 a day, get through it in a couple of weeks. And if you want, you can take a certification test, and all that information is on the site. And I see here, I didn't update the date. I always forget something. But the retail tuition for that course is 599 euros. Because you participated in this webcast, if you sign up by the end of August, send me an email or contact me through the site. Tell me that you were in the webcast, and I will give you a coupon for a 20% discount on the course. So I appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed it. I will stop sharing, and let's see if there are any questions. There is a bit of delay with Hangouts on Air. So it will take us, I'll give it just a couple of minutes. And let's open the Q&A panel. So if you have any questions about what we've talked about, be more than happy to answer. If we don't have questions about what we talked about, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have about product management or anything that we've talked about. It is really, really hot in Heidelberg, by the way. All righty. Don't see any questions so far. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know how busy you are. I hope this was valuable. This recording of this webcast will be available on my YouTube channel by Monday. That should be up. So if you want to go back and revisit it, certainly I would love it if you would pass that along to any of your colleagues, anybody that you think might benefit. And with that, I will wish you a wonderful weekend and a wonderful summer. I don't think I'll do another webcast probably before September. So Thanks, everybody.